when it comes to like the terpene and flavor debate around rosin versus, a BHO product, I heavily lean towards BHO being a better way to capture the true essence of actual flavor that you're trying to, get in the product. Because let's be honest, like you can get different levels of potency and that's great, but like what really makes cannabis unique is the flavor profiles that you can capture. And I think BHO does a much better job of capturing that and preserving it. But there's always trade-offs between the two different methods. The terpenes and flavors, I think this is probably the one area where the most controversy is. Like, people saying, oh, my solventless product is this, or my BHO product is that, it tastes better, yada yada yada. What are your thoughts on this whole debate?
All the stuff I hear about it is correct, but I feel like people do bark up the wrong tree a bit. A lot of it, I think, more of this strain in the whole strain debate should be put on the breeders themselves. Because, yes, currently there are plenty of strains that are going to be much more usable with a hydrocarbon system. If they don't have the capitate glandular trichome heads, they're not going to break up the same way. And personally, some of my favorite flowers to use myself don't have that bulbous head on the trichomes at all. It's pretty much just a little thin claw. And those don't break off much at all. You'll be lucky to get 1% doing an ice water extraction. But the solvent's obviously going to dissolve it right away. However, with all these people who are doing things like multiple thousand plant pheno hunts from massive batches of seeds, you would have thought at this point, with the right dedication, you'd be able to breed certain plants, like a haze, for example, that would have those hook-type trichomes. You would have thought they would be able to find a mutated version of that strain that actually has the glandular trichome heads. Have you ever heard of anyone actually achieving that?
Not yet. I think that's probably going to be far into the future with like genetically engineering the trichome heads to be a certain shape or whatnot. I think that's really interesting because like when you look at all the rosin products, I see a lot of products that have terpene content that doesn't boil off easily during the process. And so
in rosin,
products that are, when it comes to rosin, it's very specific to like those heavier terpenes that like tangy terps. They don't burn off easily.
One of the ones I always notice is the Tropicana terps, the tangy. That just stays no matter what. And every time someone comes to me with a high quality rosin, most of the time it's a tangy because you can't mess it up as much,
Yeah, exactly. You can't burn those terps off. So they're so heavy. While like with a BHO product, you can have the full range of flavor profiles where you like those lighter terpenes like the OGs and sours. They're known for the lighter terps that burn off really fast. So even like improperly cured flower will not smell great because all the light terps are gone.
From a scientific perspective, when you say lighter terps, can you explain that? Is that physically on a molecular level it weighs less and therefore evaporates sooner?
Exactly. Yeah, it evaporates at a lower temperature. And so even room temperature, it's going to burn off. So like when you open a bag of OG or sour, it fills up the whole room right away because all those terps are just like, readily evaporating.
That makes sense.
And so that's where, when it comes to like the terpene and flavor debate around rosin versus, a BHO product, I heavily lean towards BHO being a better way to capture the true essence of the actual flavor that you're trying to, get in the product. Because let's be honest, like you can get different levels of potency and that's great, but like what really makes cannabis unique is the flavor profiles that you can capture. And I think BHO does a much better job of capturing that and preserving it. But there's always trade-offs between the two different methods. So
definitely, but I'd completely agree with you on there, because if you're just thinking at it from a physical standpoint, first of all, in a closed loop system, there's nowhere else for the stuff to go, and it's also so cold. What do you usually run a machine at? -40?
Yeah, -40 to -60 would be the optimal temperature, and like you're trying to, and throughout the entire process, whether it's extraction or evaporating the solvent out or degassing it in a vacuum oven, you're trying to contain use the least amount of heat
Yeah.
during the whole entire process. Like ideally not seeing anything above 90 Fahrenheit if you're, making what people call like a heady batch of BHO.
For sure. And in solventless, on the opposite end, when you're doing the washing process, not only is it not contained in closed loop, you are at the minimum 32 degrees. You can't have the water freeze, and then it'll only touch minus 40 when it gets into the freeze dryer. In the freeze dryer itself, it's usually venting the terps off into atmosphere anyway.
Yep.
So as you pull vacuum on it, you're losing a lot more than you think, and it's frustrating to say the least. So yeah, I'd completely agree with you on the hydrocarbons preserving more flavor.
Yeah, I think also the type of oil that you get from a BHO process is more like, because you're pulling more extract and more terpenes, it stays more oily and preserves better on the shelf. Another thing is like, when you're using, say, a vacuum oven, you attach a cold trap to it and you're able to capture the volatile terpenes that come off and then re-add it back into your BHO to retain the flavor. With solventless, I don't see that being as easy to do because it's got a vapor stream with it, the water mixes with it, that creates a hydrosol that doesn't really mix well back into the the final product, and the water itself acts as it almost like degrades the solvent just because of the exposure to water and oxygen. And so I think that also plays a factor in the quality of terpene profile that you get from rosin versus BHO.
When you say the water adding to the solvent, are you specifically talking about like when you're extracting fresh frozen?
Yeah. When you have your hash inside a freeze dryer, when you're pulling the vacuum on it and there's moisture that you're pulling out of the product, as you're pulling water out, you're also ripping terps out.
Oh, of course,
vacuum. Yeah. And even if you wanted to save those terps, it's not necessarily easy to re-add it back into your rosin product.
No, absolutely not. And I've seen people try to do that. And that, obviously, in hydrocarbons, that's just kind of how the process goes a lot of the time. It's diamonds and terp sauce is beautiful. Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
But with rosin, I feel like if you even mention something like that, people associate it more with let's say the spray packs that are going around recently. And again, it just ties in right back to the education or lack thereof. Terpenes and cannabinoid content. What do you think is most potent?
From a scientific standpoint, I think solvent process is always going to yield a higher purity product. The advancements that have been made on the BHO side, whether it's, de-waxing your product, like back in 2014, 2013, it was like, oh, you got to de-wax all your oil. And then it turned into, you got a CRC to increase purity. And then nowadays it's like straight 99% plus isolate that people are producing in diamonds. So it's like, I don't think you can get much more pure than that. And so, yeah, it's hard to achieve anywhere close to that with rosin and whatnot. So that's kind of my thoughts on the whole potency side of things.
They're not. The process is that they literally debag the rosin they've pressed, put it in other bags, and then slowly press the terp out of that rosin. And they're left with these THCA crystals inside, which are essentially full of contaminants. So, you'll never get it to that quality. And also, it's the having all your material run down a parchment off hot plates in a long, thin sheet sounds like the perfect way to lose as much of your volatiles as possible.
Yeah.
I do see plenty of stuff on the market testing at upwards of 80% THC, usually closer to 70, but then very high terpene content. I personally find it a little hard to trust those tests, though, when the tolerances are plus or minus 14%.
Yeah, agreed. I think tasting the product is probably the best way, or consuming the product is the best way to really know, if the flavor profile is really true to what the test results say, and if it actually has a potency as well. So
they're using the testing the foods they use these days. They're accurate, very scientific. So I know that tolerance is a matter of guidelines pretty much. But you're right. seeing what smells good and tastes best. When I first moved to Colorado and started frequenting dispensaries years ago, I figured out pretty quick to stop trusting the labels and only trust the looks, because I would get home and be disappointed. I'm like, oh, but the label said this. Well, should have trusted your gut, didn't you?
Liability of the different processes and the overall safety of the process. Do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so obviously the safety comes again once more to a matter of education, because there's nothing unsafe about a properly operating hydrocarbon system in lab. However, it is inherently more unsafe than solventless because of the fact that you have pressurized flammable solvents in there. And with solventless, the biggest risk you have is flooding the room, or if you're really not paying attention, crushing your hands in a press. But I've never heard of that happening personally, and the flooding the room isn't too much of a worry. So there is the safety concern, and from a regulatory situation, that's exactly why with hydrocarbon you have to call in the fire marshal, get all your checks done and everything to make sure you or your employees or your neighbors aren't going to be injured. And that is just simply not a thing with solventless. With solventless, you put a couple warning stickers on the machines, and that's enough. That's all you need. No one's gonna hurt themselves really, and it's makes a big difference. But then when it comes to the scalability of that safety measures on the hydrocarbon is part of why it can get so big. If a solventless lab was scaled up to the same production levels as hydrocarbon, then yeah, there's a lot more risk of that person crushing their hands in a press if they're using that many machines at once. And that's one of the things that always kind of put me off with the design of the low temp Medusa machine. Have you seen much of that before? It's all of them at once. So if you have a blowout, you kind of have to stop the whole process or completely waste that one thing that blew out. So really complicated. I do see people operating these with just a single guy, and oh my god, it's impressive. They are doing a lot to make this happen. So realistically, I'd say at scale, rosin would still be the safer approach, but they both have their inherent dangers. What do you think? Because I know you've seen a lot more of actual hydrocarbon labs running than I have.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think obviously one has a much higher risk and hazard with the overall process. One is running at high pressures. It's flammable / explosive solvents that you're dealing with, and so when you're doing that overall process, you need to make sure you're doing it in the C1V1 environment, that your team members are trained properly, that you're following proper SOPs. You need to be a lot more detailed in how you're doing your process to achieve a consistent result and be able to really output a high quality, but also do it repeatedly and not have to worry about blowing up the water. When it comes to the scalability, obviously the BHO process is a lot more scalable in terms of overall biomass extracted, but I do see solventless processes becoming more larger in scope or larger in size and being able to do larger volumes. But at the end of the day, even those processing volumes are nowhere near same level. What I do find interesting lately is a lot of the people that are using a combination of the two processes, being able to do some sort of cryo-sifted extract and then taking that and putting it into a BHO process to finish it up. I think that's ingenious because it's a way to kind of concentrate your biomass into a smaller form and then melting it into the solvents and getting the best of both worlds. Now, I don't know a ton of people doing this yet, but I do think that being able to do that not only makes your overall BHO process more efficient, but it increases the safety of the overall process as well.